To close this month of January, we will be discussing this beautiful birthday boy here, 150 years of this beautiful book, Heaven and Hell, part of the codification as well. And we thought that it would be prudent to bring someone who has knowledge, who have exemplify the teachings that we receive from this beautiful science as well, to talk about it, to explain, and to give some accounts about what is about, and again, celebrate with us, celebrate these 150 years in the right way. And Adriano is the president and one of the founders of the Mount Vernon Spiritist Center in New York, has been actively studying Spiritism for the past 90 years, very well. Currently at the Mount Vernon Spiritist Center, he coordinates Spiritist studies groups and is a counselor at the Fraternal Service meeting. Has spoken at different Spiritist centers in the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, in Connecticut, and he's a great contributor to this cause. So with no further ado, we would like to welcome Adriano to talk about this beautiful topic, heaven and hell, that we always like to know more and more, right? So please, thank you.
First, like that Jesus will bless our presence tonight. I'm very honored and happy to find myself among good friends, making new friends. I'm really glad to be here. I can't express how much I am very honored and have coming here again, even with all this distance. I make it with so much happiness because I'm coming to be with friends and talking about Spiritism, which has been for me a great pleasure and one of the most important things in my life. And our topic tonight, as our friend Leo have spoken, is about the book Heaven and Hell, which I have observed throughout my experience. It's not so long, as everyone heard, on Spiritism. People in general, they don't read much of this book. They don't read on it. So I guess it's because of the title of the book. In some way, it brings something for the people to let it for later. Maybe after reading the gospel, maybe after studying the spirit book, or the romances of Andrea and so on. And it's postponing the reading of this book here. But I think it's just when the person starts reading it, after all this time, he will say to him or herself, "Oh my God, I should have read this book first." Because it's amazing, amazing. There is this like a comment of Joseph Campbell. I don't know if you have heard about him, but he's very famous in America and elsewhere. He tells about the legends and about the Buddhists. But one said, I don't remember where this garden is, but it's a garden, a Buddhist garden. And he says that in this garden, in the entrance, a big entrance to the garden, a gate to lead inside the garden, there were two Buddhas in each side of the garden, one of the right, another one obviously in the left. But the statues of the Buddha, they were built in such a way that it scared people. It was like a ferocious head, a big head, a scaring head. Both of them were scaring. And people that doesn't understand about the symbolism of the religion, about the Buddha, wouldn't understand why people, or why they put those two ferocious, ugly Buddha in the entrance of such a beautiful garden, a beautiful park. But he explains why those two Buddhas were there. The position of the Buddha was that he was like, I suppose that I am the Buddha. And I am their statue. Then the position of the hands of the Buddha, that's the key of the symbolism. Because the Buddha, one of the hands, the right hand, was that way, and the other hand of the Buddha, the left hand, was this way. The symbolism is that he was inviting people to stop a little bit, but inviting them as well to come inside the park in a gentle and fraternal and peaceful way. It's like this book here. People are scared because of the title of the book. But I guess it's like the Buddha, like, just relax. And coming in, and you find yourself in the most beautiful garden that you ever seen. And you will satisfy you in clarifying the mysticisms. Because for the people that never enter to that garden, they have 1,000 different thoughts and explanation what will be inside that garden. They have invented many different theories that will match somewhat with the heaven and hell that was portrayed throughout history, and people is always scared to check what it is in there. And this book is really explains the whole thing if the person dares to hold a little bit and adventure in read and study this book here. And it's so amazing, this book, because it's accomplishing now 150 years, and it means that it was in 1855 that it came out. And for us to really give such a value to this book, you have to come back a little for that time when this book was brought about. Because it was a different time that we have today. A cultural time was different. The people of the time, they believed in different, theories, religion. We have the Christian religions of the time, which was the Catholics, the Protestants in general, in France, in England. And they were, in the end of more than a millennium of power in Christianity. And at the same, more or less the same time, came many other discoveries of the old books of the Bible. And that way, the church itself was on check. The church was losing many adherents to the church. There was that mentality of the time. Besides, there is coming as well a new movement. There was the Enlightenment of the time. That came, the beginning of the science more towards the 21st century that we have today. There was the rationalism that was the time, the positivism of the time, and the reasoning. What it meant. At that time, people, especially in France, in England, they were to prove the things by seeing it. If they couldn't see, they couldn't measure it in some way, they would really criticize it. They wouldn't believe in that thing, in that theory, in any way. And they gave, a little before Kardec, the rise as well for the so-called high criticism and the criticism that were so much in fashion in Europe, especially in Germany. They would criticize dearly those things that were not appropriate, explained it the way that science could prove it at that time. But how could science prove things at that time if there were such a primitive science compared that we have today? And as well, we have that science that crushed the beliefs, the heaven and hell, because that science was bringing that about, and people was losing the faith in the church because, especially the belief in the classical theory or understanding of heaven and hell that church was bringing about. And it was the same time, a couple of years before, that Darwin came with the theory of the evolution, striking the church as well. Darwin had a great difficult time with the church. The church attacked him very much on his theory, on his work. So the church itself, the believers in the Christianity in general, they were very angry. They're very angry, to see that movements coming out. So there was Kardec in the midst of that revolution. He came to publish Spiritism, and especially this book, Heaven and Hell. It was the last brief of the theory, I could say that way, of the heaven and hell of the church. Kardec struck down and destroyed the whole 2,000 and much years before Christ about the idea that people hold or held and still holding today in other religions about heaven and hell. So Kardec was, he was courageous. He was brave. Couldn't be a man any better than Kardec at that time and still today to adventure in putting that book and publishing in the midst of that old thing. Because he was attacked and criticized by the church and believers of the Christianity that could understand him. And the other side, he had the science of the time. The positivists, the Enlightenment people, criticizing him because it was a science that per se couldn't be proved in lab or in that way that the science was working at that time. So he was surrounded by, we could say, enemies of his bringing the science that is Spiritist that we so much love today. In that way, when we go for this book, if before we come to understand how this book came about, and then we revere this book, we come to it in a sense of honoring it, that we feel something like flowing through our body. If we see that it is a sacred thing that came to humanity that we still today can't understand how much important is this book. For myself, I'll tell a little bit that this book served for me. But Kardec, I will go over the book superficially because the book is so, wide in bringing the concepts, explaining how Spiritism understanding of the heaven and hell held or hold by the people's mind. But Kardec is methodically, he brings step by step, explaining so clear vocabulary, putting the words, the sentences, explaining for the people how it is in Spiritism view, heaven and hell. When the person starts reading the book and understanding it, when he finishes it, he is completely, if he held any thoughts about the old times of heaven and hell, he is transformed. If the person doesn't want really to understand it, he is confused. At least he's very confused, because the person that reads this book with good faith, he can't or she can't remain the same forever. I guarantee you, because it's a masterpiece that for 1,000 years to come, a masterpiece like this in the same topic as we have. And he starts about explaining the nothingness. Because at that time, the science was trying to explain the universe. They denied God as the source of creating the whole universe. And for, a portion of society, they believed in nothing after death. So there was just the physical body and physical experience. And in that way, Kardec started killing the nothing. He explained that the idea of nothingness doesn't exist per se. It doesn't exist per se. It was just a matter of perspective and understanding and mis-explanation of the whole process of creation. There was the idea that we brought so much from the past, and now the soul people that understood there's nothing after death deny the whole thing, and they came now for the other extreme of the idea. And they hold the idea. And then he explains why can't be nothing in anywhere. There is the spirit, and he proves by explaining that there is a spirit, that we human beings are spirit, immortal spirits. So after that, we won't go for nothing. There is somewhere that we go. And when the person reads that chapter, if the person is an atheist, a materialist, he would come to himself and say, oh, thank God, I am something, I am a spirit. That starts the healing process of the human being according to the belief. He's starting in having a true belief, a basis that will lead him later on to the next and next steps that he's going to explain. For myself, I remember myself when I was a kid, just about maybe 7 to 11, 12 years old, my torment, one of my torments, was the idea of nothingness. There was something that was really painful for me. Because in my mind, just the earth was the whole universe. Was just a kid in a remote corner of Brazil and so on. Just the earth was the whole universe. And I was thinking, my God, if God didn't exist, so what be creating us? If the earth just doesn't exist in a moment, how could be of us? If I die, where I go? All those questions and the idea that nothing could exist, because I gave the possibility that the nothing could exist. And that was a torment for me. I would cry many days about this. I would cry many days. This tormented me very much. And my mom said to me, you look like an old man of 30 years old, because your face is already looking old, because you're so worried about those things. But he didn't understand was my torment. And I think today, that's when I start reading Spiritism and came especially to the book that explained this thing. I was freeing myself of a slavery that kept me not only in this lifetime maybe, but other lifetime. Freeing me for that kind of belief that hold me so much depression. And when I start in Spiritism, and we're hearing the whole movement of Spiritism, and we understand those things, and then we value the teaching of Spiritism for the infants, for the kids. Because we never know. Every kid's mind is different from each one. They have a different past. That might be millions of kids like me in the past suffering from depression, because we never thought that a kid like 6 to 10 years old will be thinking about those things that adults not thinking on them. But they are. I was one of them, and was just one of my torment in relation to religion. And I guess not only the kids, how many millions of people are held in the same situation, in the same torment about nothingness. And when they read as Kardec explained here, an explanation based on reason and rational thought, they have a base to believe, and they get out of so much trouble they going about because they have nowhere to grab their hands to say, I have a base. Now I can believe in something that I will exist forever. That is so consolation that a person that believes in nothing and suddenly, or has doubts, and suddenly he or she says, you know what, I won't die. I will be existing forever in any way. And then Kardec, in the next step, he goes on explaining us so beautiful as well something that torments human being, not only the kids. He killed the death. Because over time and over time, people thought and was afraid and still are afraid of death. Because they hold so much illusions, mysticism about after death. They are not sure about hell, about heaven, about nothingness. So they are in the middle of a big confusion. And that thing brings people to be scared about dying. And then Kardec says, for a spiritist, for the believer of Spiritism, there's no more reason to be scared about dying, because he or she knows that there will be just a biological transformation, that the spirit will change just the realm, that may be sharing the same space as their loved ones on earth, but in a different state of mind, depending for sure, as we see later on their accomplishments, what their deeds were about when they were in the flesh. In that way, I see many people, I have counseled many people, they are really afraid of death. And for some, it's really a pathology. They are scared all the time. If they have any light illness, they just start, potentializing it because they're afraid they're gonna die. And they start taking medication that is not needed because they think that, they will prevent dying. And they are scared in the middle of the night because they are afraid of going to sleep. And they say, I want to sleep because maybe I'll be dying tonight. And they go to streets to walk in the middle of the snow and so on. I know those such of people. And there are many and many millions of those people around the globe. And we never know whom of them, because sometimes they don't tell those kind of afflictions they are bringing to them. And then death as well, according to, the world view until Kardec is changed. For a spiritist, that is, a long-term study in Spiritism seems, something very common. But, for a person that, throughout time had problems, and I see that humanity, if we go for humanity, is still this problem of death, of nothingness, is a still big issue in acquiring of happiness for those people. And still for us that is spiritists, I know spiritists that they have problem with that as well. But if they come to the Heaven and Hell book, I'm sure they will be enlightened and clarified in such a way that there will be a healing, a very deep healing for them. And then we have here basically the chapters that gave the title of the book, the Heaven and Hell, the Angels and Demons. Those are 3 chapters of this book dealing specifically to the title of the book. This is as well something very big on human mind. in human belief, in the behavior of the humans that is spread around the planet in both realms of life. This issue of heaven and hell held for thousands of years in the mind of people. And it's so difficult to unroot, to cut the roots of heaven and hell. Even after so long time studying and practicing Spiritism, even though sometimes they change it, the way we understand heaven and hell, we still in some way behaving as we believed in heaven and hell. I'm going to explain it later. But the idea of hell as well, especially hell, as, as described by the Bible, is very afflicting for people. I can tell you, because I was another torment for me when I was a kid. I don't know if you ever observed the sky when there are those clouds, you know, the reddish clouds, the blazed ones, that they like dancing in the sky. Have you ever seen those clouds? They're not so white, but they are reddish, especially in the afternoon going to the evening. They turn red, blaze like fire, you know, burning throughout the sky. For my childhood, maybe I was an artist. Maybe for an artist, a painter will be maybe, you know, a very beautiful canvas of the infinite, I could put it that way. But for my childhood, it was a torment, I tell you. Because I have heard and read on the Bible that the word in hell is a fire. Is a pure fire that the person, the spirit, will burn there forever. And the first end of the word described by the Bible was by water through Noah and so on. But the last one will be on fire. Will fire earth. It's there in the Bible. My mom used to tell me, reading the Bible, I would heard in the radio, the ending of the word is very close, as say in the Bible as well. For infant mind, close is close. I mean, it's not like, you know, that we have the idea of time as we mature on and with technology. It's different. But when I observe the clouds, I say, my God, I think the world will be put on fire. And I start being in depression when I saddened right away when I saw a red blazed cloud on the sky. Because I thought in some way the clouds were getting together at night and will put fire on earth. And maybe there was a fire going for hell to burn the people forever. That was a torment. I tell you, it was something that really tormented me very deep. And then, I mean, that was when I was childhood, and then I came in the adolescence and so on. Those things came back and go into my subconscious. But when I reached the Spiritist that explained all those things that wasn't true, really true, literal true, but a symbolism, I told myself, my God, I torment my life for something that really doesn't exist. Thank God that doesn't exist per se. And then Kardec started explaining the idea of heaven and hell and destroy it completely, step by step. As we have today, it's just an archetype that we still have in us about heaven and hell. Because Kardec explains to us the hell that portrayed in the Bible and according to Spiritism is different. In the Bible, it explains there is a place, physical place somewhere in the universe. They don't say where it is, but a place that the condemned person on earth will be in that place, burning in that fire forever and so on. They, put a lot of torment in that hell. There's a physical place. Although there's some differences in explaining the hell, but basic was that full idea of torment. And that idea of hell was brought as well before Christ on the Gentiles and other beliefs that had as well the idea of a place in somewhere that would be tormenting the souls, the guilt souls, after death. And as well, there were the paradise, the heaven, and somewhere other place, maybe too distant, right? Because otherwise, the fire on the hell will be like getting warmer in the in heaven. Maybe it was the other side of the universe, very far with one another. Another place which the good souls, the good spirits, by the good price on earth would be living there forever. Forever, for eternity. And this, no matter how many years on earth they had lived, they will be going to that place. And of course, the limbo that in this new era of the church they don't have anymore. They used to have that limbo of that time. There will be the infants, like they died, they would go in there and they will be escaping that place only through prayer and some other issues that were very hard for even for an innocent soul like a kid to get out of there. So we had a very difficult issue in that church held the Catholic Church and the Protestant as well had the idea of heaven and hell. But Kardec came out of this. Explained, my friends, let us think on this situation. Because Kardec on the Spirit's book has established what is God. And coming from the idea that God, according to Spiritism, is an impossibility, totally absurd idea to have the idea that the church held at that time. If God is so merciful, so love, how could it be a place that will burn and torment a soul for so long eternity? How could it be that way? If just a common person on earth, inferior that we are, couldn't have such terrible and tormented idea for anybody. How could God put that way? And how to explain it if it doesn't exist per se a physical place? And then Kardec came the great idea. Not the great, a great explanation coming from the spirits. No. Actually, there is a torment, like hell described for the church, but that establishes, if the person wants, through their behavior inside and in the mind of everyone. And that person can be on earth or in anywhere of the universe, because that states of mind or spirit follow the person anywhere that she or he goes throughout the universe. In that way, the torments, the consequences, is the consequences of the misdeeds or the bad deeds or the evil deeds that the person have committed throughout his or her lifetime. And moreover, that torments or the suffering that everyone's go through is a consequence of the inferiority that we carry within us. Is a lack of evolution. In that way, he explains, every human being on earth have erred except for Christ. Except for Christ. And in that way, there will be always a consequences according as well to the degree of wrongdoings that we have committed throughout history. And since we never die and will never die ever, our spirit will exist forever. what happens is our body will cease to exist, biologically saying. The spirit will go to somewhere. And this place is not a place according to the church had explained for the planet, but a spiritual place that surrounds the earth that we call the spiritual world. And then in this spiritual world is where the spirits go. But through the affinity, through their minds' links, they get together according to their evolution way of being, state of minds, and so on. In that way, when somebody goes by passing away to the spiritual world, so they will be in the right place according to their deeds. The evil ones, by practicing the evil deeds on earth, will be in the suffering, most suffering place in the spiritual world. And in that way, it's building up layers of flavors, places of places in the spiritual world, according to evolution of every groups, large groups of the spirits. So we could say in that way, there are many degrees of spiritual realms surrounding earth. And of course, the lowest ones is for the lowest evolved spirits, for those ones that were more compromised with their moral deeds on earth. So in that way, Kardec explained, that's for the suffering spirits constitutes, I could say, a punishment or a hell. It's a tormenting place which they put themselves in the spiritual world. It's a consequence of the evil doing. Couldn't be any other way, because otherwise wouldn't be any correction for, the wrongdoings. The spirit should know the consequences, good or bad, that they do on earth. And for sure in the spiritual world there are thousands, millions, and billions of spirits suffering the consequences or enjoying the consequence of the good one that they have done. And they can stay there a long time, for thousands of years and so on. But the good thing about as well, the Kardec's explanation about hell and heaven, especially hell, is that no matter how much evil the spirit have ever committed, how much inferior the spirit is, he or she will not stay in that condition forever. It can stay long, very long time. Indeed it can. However, there is one law that Spiritist book explains, the law of progress. And it's made for each and every one, not only on earth, but throughout the universe, that everyone should go through. And comes a time that those evil spirits, they will tire themselves on doing evil. And they will restart again the good pathway. And in that way, there is the idea of that punishment or suffering that will never end. So in that way, there is hope. There is hope for every spirit, no exception or rule on the universe, for coming to be good. So in that way, for us as Spiritists that has this idea, we should as well put this in perspective for the time being on earth. Because we see in some way so much evil being done for many people, and then we think that it will stay forever, that they will never come by on understanding the principles of morality and will reform themselves. When we see those criminals, when we see those kind of things, and we should say, one day, we never know, could be tomorrow, they will change the trackway of their Just check my hour here. My time. Oh my God, it's gone a lot of time already. So the next step of Kardec is that on explaining the future consequences for good and for bad, he established one chapter. Is another masterpiece inside of a masterpiece. Is this chapter. Is the penal code of the future life. Kardec puts 33 codes, like articles that we have in the laws that we have today, some articles he put in there. And each of everyone is something that you amaze on reading them. How profound, how teaching, how educational the person to read it. Because Kardec bringing those penal codes, the responsibility that the person has, even though there's always hope, there is always a good God watching no matter how bad or evil the spirit is, but he states as well, you should learn. You gotta pay for what you have done. Although there is a law of love, will be helping you through redoing your mistake, there is here those codes, the consequences that you do. And there is as well the codes, if you observe those, there is the rewards, the consequences, the joys, and so on, explaining how good is to be good. How good is to be good on earth. And it put in a sensible way, in a reasonable way, because the time of Kardec was time of reasoning as well. Reason time, movement. And Kardec was to be, called the reasoning person. And he put that way so much reason for our reasoning that we can reason this in any time and found us in a profound base. And as well, there's the other majority of the book, not majority, maybe half or something of the book, that is dedicated for the examples. Because Kardec, he knew that he needed to exemplify what he was saying. He was bringing about a new theory, a new science, a new perspective, a new belief. And he found it that was important to bring some examples what he was saying. How can you say there's no heaven? How can you say there's no hell? How can you say that what you're saying is true? But okay, he maybe have thought that way. I'll bring you the examples of the spirits that have lived on earth. And they tell you what they're going on afterwards. There won't be my words, my only explanations, but the explanation of themselves. And he created here, that is not a static, classes, but he established 7 classes of the spirits in the spiritual world, of people on earth, with 7 classes. And within the 7 classes, he brought like maybe 10 spirits to explain. For example, there's the first class that he puts the happy spirits. The happy spirits. He brings the witness of them. They come and say why they are happy, what they have done on earth to deserve that. To explain, if you do good deeds, see, this spirit is coming. He did good deeds and he explained us why he is happy or she is happy in the spiritual world. So it's reasonable, right? It makes sense for us to see, to talk or hear for someone that go through the experience. He brings here the happy spirit. And I thought that would be interesting for us if I bring here, I suggest you to go there and read I think 10 or so examples. But there's one here, the first one, by the way, as a spirit called Sanzon. Sanzon. It's very interesting, related to spiritists. That's why I brought it here. Because Sanzon, he was a member of the Spiritist Society in Paris of the time. So, he was a spiritist before going to the biological transformation and passing away. And he asked the members, when he was alive, to evoke him right after death. When my body dies, you just can invoke me, please. That's my wish. That's my wish. And so Kardec did. Yeah. He promised, we'll invoke you. Let's see what's going on with you right after death. And it was so interesting, that conversation, that explanation that Sanzon gave. Because Kardec makes many questions to him. And first question was, what? They evoked him, because that time they evoked the spirits to talk with them, many kinds of spirits. They had a mediumship meeting with the mediums, and evoked Sanzon right after death. Can you come and talk to us? And he said, I'm right here. I can talk to you. Say. And then, what are you feeling? I'm feeling very good, by the way, a little tired. I just left my body on earth. And how are you feeling? I'm feeling very good, and so on. And what you do in the spiritual world? What makes you happy in the spiritual world? Because he is in the category of a happy spirit. And what you doing there? Are you doing something? And said, yes, I'm working. I'm helping. I'm doing something useful. And then Kardec, well, how come you just, left the body? And then he said, the happiness of the spirit is to be useful. It's to be working. That's why I'm so happy. Because right after death, I can be useful to human being. I can be useful for everyone, because God entrusted me with that. And Kardec asked him, can you give us any message you can deliver for your funeral people? So he left a message of faith, resignation, and transformation for the people. And Kardec went to the funeral by the day of burying and read the message that he had spoken like one day before his funeral for the people. People was staggered, surprised. She's not burying his body yet, she's just telling us. Imagine, we're burying our the body of our loved ones and so on, and come Kardec and say, oh, people, I have a message here from the deceased. From the deceased. And he was, addressing his families on earth, because his family on earth had not so much trust in what he had said on earth, his beliefs on the spiritism and so on. He addressed in such a beautiful way for them. And Sanzon turned out to be one of the spirits that throughout the other books of Kardec brought many messages from the spiritual world, many instructions, and really was a very effective worker on Spiritism doctrine, on spirit, and that's what made him happy. And then, us as Spiritists, it's a lesson, a beautiful lesson for us, because even though we don't believe and we accept the idea of the spiritual world in different realms of, experience, we are wishing to just, die, not being happy, but as well being in vacation. Oh, I will stay in nosso lar for 6 months, and then we see what I'm gonna do, because I need rest. And Sanzon just came right after death. No, I'm working. That's the source of happiness. So there is, a very deep invitation for us. If we really want to be happy, he is in the category of a happy spirit. He wasn't happy he was really, a good person on earth. He gave examples. He suffered a lot by, the end of his life. But he was an extraordinary personality on earth. It was a common among many people. And then we see that we don't need that extraordinary things to be happy. It's just do what we're supposed to do. And then comes the second class, that is the average spirits. That there is one communication that explains to his son, the average one, I suffer in the spiritual world. And his son said, what? You suffer? You were such a honest man on earth. You did good things that was supposed to do by society. And said, that was really the problem. I was on average, doing what society was telling me to do. I pay my taxes. I went to the church. I was in trouble for the justice. But there is something else that the honest person should do, and I'll teach you what it is. And so he goes beyond what society have as standards of honest and good person. He is really charitable in every means, respecting, loving, doing sharing, forgiving, all those virtues that we go through the gospel according to Spiritism. That's why I suffer so much, because I lost so much time with just thinking that I was, doing what society was asking me to do. Why I could have done much more than that. That's why I suffer. That's the average spirit. That's why you put average. Because we tend to, in some way, think, nobody's complaining about me. I pay my taxes. I go into my job and fulfilling the time. My boss doesn't complain me much. I go to the Spiritist Center quite a while. I read Spirit's book. Those are just, the average. But the average sufferer in the spiritual world, I tell you. If you don't want to suffer, you get out the average class. And there's the other one. I'll explain it more succinctly to you. Is the suffering one. The suffering one is really, because we think and we say, oh, the spirits are suffering in spiritual world. But the suffering ones that Kardec put in this class here is those ones that really were, in such symbolism here, evil ones. Not forever, but they were practically practicing evil deeds on earth. They were those masterminds of crimes, of corruptions, a lot of evil things on earth. That was the suffering in spirits. They really suffer in the lower zones of the spiritual realm, the lower zones. And for those suffering spirits, the hell displayed and portrayed by the church is really light. Because it's not because of the place, because their guilt conscious charged so much of them. Because Kardec brings some example. They see in front of them their victims. Their minds is constantly rewinding and re-seeing the scenes of their crimes. The people they made starve for death and so on. And that's the real punishment for this kind of spirit, and they suffer. They suffer a lot. That's the other class. And that the other class that suffer no less than those ones is the suicidal class. That is huge, huge, huge on the spiritual road. Spiritual road. They suffer as well, as much as the suffering ones. We can't tell you how much the suicide suffer, because the suicide as well, they in a way have harmed so much their spiritual body. They have in a way gone against so divine law of life that they suffered so much. And they go to the realms of the spiritual very low according to their quality of suicide and many things that go in accordance to their intentions or what brought them to the suicide, but the fact is they go so much suffering. And there is as well, their, explaining how they feel in the spiritual world. And for the person in the Spiritist Center that works in the mediumship meeting, are witness of their talking. They come in such a desperation because they are reviving every moment their act of suicide. And they say, I tried to kill myself, I don't know what's going on now, I feel alive, at the same time I see my body there just, in a shot, and so on. It's suffering. And for the person who wants to know about those class, reads the book, Memories of a Suicide. And then there's the other class, is the repentant criminals. Repentant criminals. Kardec brings this class, and there's many interview with them. Those ones are the criminals that we can see sometimes in the news and our neighbor and so on, and they bring the experience, how they feel in the spiritual. But they are repentant ones, and they say how much they suffer. As I told you, they say, I see my crime every step of the way. I saw those ones that I have committed crime on them every step of the way. And they say, oh my God, one of them said, the hell portrayed by the church doesn't stop a criminal. Doesn't stop a criminal. Because the real criminal, they laugh on those things. But I tell you, if they read, they say, our comments, that will stop them. Because they will see that they will losing their time on practicing evil things, crimes, and they will have to retract back through the same suffering. He tells in such a way that makes much more sense and will educate in much more efficient way the criminal mind. He said, I knew about hell on earth, but it didn't stop me. But now, understanding there's no hell, what I'm going through here, I learned the lesson and I repented, because it's much more suffering than the other pathetic explanation that we had on earth about the punishment after death. And Kardec, every communication that he had received through those interviews, he gives an explanation. The spirit guide of the medium gives an explanation why he or she is suffering that such a way in the spiritual world. And then he points that way. See, that's why heaven, doesn't make sense for these people. See, that's not hell makes sense. See why is a state of mind of that person in the spiritual world. He's bringing about, referring to his previous explanation in other chapters to make sense what he has said. And then as well, there is the other class, is the hardened spirits in the spiritual world. Those ones that even suffering in the spiritual world, the consequence of their deeds, they are not repented. They still hardened, and they still wanted to make the evil deeds. That we can put in the class that we have today, the obsessors. They are hardened, and they want to make people evil doing, to prejudice people, all those kinds of harms that we hear so much on influencing us in our daily lives. This can be put in the class of hardened spirits. Even though they're suffering, they don't care. They go on suffering. And they will go suffering until they repent and start the good way. But even for those hardened spirits, Kardec is saying, hold on. They will come by. They will repent. Just have patience on them. Someday they will be tired of suffering, practicing evil deeds, and they will repent. And then the last class is the expiation class. Those one that goes on expiation on earth. And I brought another interview because I think it's related so much with us. Because it's saying that there's the earth states a trial or an expiation or atonement. And we brought a case that is about Julian. Julian, he gives his, it is very long, right? Just summarizing here so we can understand it better. He on earth, by the time he was using the body alive, he was a beggar. He was a beggar from the early age of his life. And he lived about 60 years on earth. And he begged for his whole life. But there is, some teachings on this. And he was a different beggar. Not a different beggar could say that, because we never know whom the beggar, why they are begging. But he gives the explanation. He was a beggar from the early age. He was born in a poor family of Jewish people, and their father, his mother has died very early. Later on, his father had died too, and left him with a brother. And later on, he had another cousin that the mother family as well disappeared in some way. So in that way, he had responsibility on his hands to help the cousin and his brother and other ones that was in some way related to him. He brought him so much compassion that he wanted to help them. But he was just a common person with no much skills. His earnings wasn't so much to help himself. How could I help others, like those related to me? What he did, he worked at night to provide some money for himself and for others, and during the day he begged. And he did it for whole life. He worked at night and begged during the day. But he begged and he said, I never on my life used 1 pen of my begging for myself. And I took most of my money of my working to help people. And he stopped begging. He helped the related to them, paid education for them, and started helping widows. Whenever he found someone in need, he was there helping them with his begging work, could put that way. And he begged his whole life. He created such a, impression in society of that time. Everybody loved. He said in the beginning it was very hard because people were suspicious to me. But after a long time of begging and seeing his work, people knew that he wasn't begging for himself, but for the good of others. In that way, when he died, on the day of his funeral, every store on the city had closed the doors in honor to him. Everybody in the city loved him so much because of his good work, even small, but for good of others. And Kardec interviewed him. You were such a good person on earth. Did so much. Why you went through so harsh, I could put here, and Kardec used that word, punishment on earth. And he said, thank God I went through the experience. It was very hard indeed. And it wasn't like an injustice of God to me. But I tell you why I went through that situation. Because one of my previous lifetimes, I was kind of a king, a prince. There was many people under his influence, like a city. He, was that kind of person in power. But he was very, very greedy. Avarice was his common logo. And he taxed all the people, even the beggars. That was his expiation. All the beggars in the city, on his command, had to pay taxes of what he had gained on their begging time. If they're during the day you receive $10, so you're gonna pay a tax for him. And he created a system in which he increased the beggars on his command. And that numbers of beggars couldn't be decreased. In that way, through his lifetime, he maintained such numbers of beggars to collect their taxes for his pocket. So, stimulating and making new beggars. If he sees the statistics of beggars is decreasing, so I gotta do something to make beggars, because I need their taxes. That was what he did in that lifetime. So in this lifetime that he came as a beggar, he was to expiate, to redo and go through the same, experience that he made so many people to suffer. Even though he had suffered in the spiritual world, because he said, when I was in the spiritual world, constantly I was in front of those ones that make them to beg. I was seeing their faces, paying me my taxes, going on starving, just because I made them beggars. And I implored of the deep of my heart to God give me this experience on earth, to go through this situation. And God have granted me the opportunity to go through this experience. In that way, thanks God, I went that experience successfully. And he, in a way, had prepared the past deeds. And he said, I have much still to do, because through the experience, I just paid what I was wanting to the God's law. Now I have to start creating some credit. See? Isn't it better than the idea of hell? For the people of the time of he was a king, his dad, could be saying that the better idea was to put him in hell forever, burning there forever. But God had another idea. God would be saying, no, better, when he repents, I'll bring him back to the earth and do the good to cover the past wrong deed that he did on earth. In that way, he will learn the lesson. And later on, he will do so much good that will cover the multitudes of sins. We could use the words of Christ. So in that way, the whole idea of heaven and hell is to, empower us with different perspective, not condemning. Because we tend to condemn a lot. And if we are in front of especially the hardened ones, the criminal ones, it's real hard. We tend to give the worst of all punishment for them. I remember one day, came to our center, if I have any more time here, sorry. I'll just 2 minutes more, sorry. In front of, came a spirit, discarnate one, to tell, he was desperate. He said, I don't want to kill anymore. I don't want to kill anymore. I don't want to kill anymore. I killed so many people. I don't want to kill anymore. Please help me. I don't want to kill anymore. It was that when he was incarnate, he killed so many women. He killed so many women. But he was desperate to stop. In that time, for my God, I'm in front of a criminal of the worst that I ever seen. If it wouldn't be the case that I was a spiritist and understanding the whole thing, I would be saying to him, go to that place there, go to hell. That's your place. But instead, I said, we understand your desperation. You're repenting from the wrongdoings. And there's a new pathway for you, and God never ceased to love you even though you went from him. And there is still people that loves you. They couldn't believe, he couldn't believe that people loved him still. And by the end of our conversation come out a spirit that he knew that loved him still, even though all those crimes and terrible ones that he went through on earth. When we see those cases, we see the beauty and love of Christ. And then comes to this point here, that's the Spiritist belief. Joanna de Angelis says throughout her books that a correct belief is healing, and what the people need is a correct belief, because from the correct belief springs all our behaviors. If we had an incorrect belief and then we tend to condemn, we tend to misbehave or do this and that. He goes explaining, she goes explaining. Through the correct belief, we have the right and correct thought. From having the correct thought, we have the correct words. From the correct words, we have the correct style of living. And then everything go incorrect because of the correct belief. And in that way, we have a correct belief on Spiritism, and that way supports us in being correct in all our life experience, in whatever situation we find in ourselves. In that way, we get out of the hell and find ourselves really free to choose the consequences for our deeds. I think our time is over. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry.
We would like to ask some questions. Yes, Adriano, please.
Okay, if
we
could
can.
answer.
We thank you for your time. We would like to, if you would like to, if you need to stand up and stretch, it's okay. I know it's a little over an hour. It's okay if you have to use the restroom. Please do so. We will take some questions. I'll just raise your arm. I got you. And I'll just come to you in the order that I see it, and we'll give ourselves some time. One of the things that I would like to ask Adriano, in this book, as he mentioned, that the second part goes towards the explanations, right? The examples. So as he said, so Kardec bring all this knowledge, and then he said, okay, this is what it is. No, we have to bring examples. But we would like to hear a little bit more clarification, Adriano, on the idea of evocation, evoking the spirit that Kardec at that time had as a practice. And you also gave an explanation of the spirit that was in the mediumistic meeting. The majority of the Spiritist centers, they hold that mediumistic meeting. So I'd just like to kind of get you to a better explanation on this idea of evocation. Is it needed? What was done before? In short words, please.
Oh yeah, the time of Kardec was the beginning of Spiritism, and we could, we have learned so much by the price. We have 150 years, so now, in terms of relating to the spiritual world, we have a different price. The time of Kardec was needed to evoke the spirits. Was the beginning. Kardec he knew that it could come spontaneously to talk. But Kardec needed a certain kind of spirits to give a certain kind of example. In this case of the heaven and hell here, he needed to evoke the classes of the hardened spirits to give the examples. And he knew by news, by people talking of certain people have died, was so evil on earth. And that way, he evoked that spirit with the help of the spirit guide to give the example. And he created these 7 classes here by evoking to put them in the classes. Otherwise, it would be a long time to just let them come, and then they would never come sometimes. Kardec had a short time, to put the book in price, and it was a common price to evoke the spirit. But Kardec put it very clearly in the medium's book. For the future times, not needed. We can do it for sure, but it's not needed. The spirit comes spontaneously. And he said, one of the problems of evoking the spirit is that the spirit cannot come sometimes. They have their experience. And sometimes they could come and say that is the evoked one. If I evoke, for example, Abraham Lincoln, there will come a spirit and say that he is Abraham Lincoln, and that then he was not. He was just pretending to be Abraham Lincoln. So in that way, if the group is not experienced enough, it will be mystified. So in that way, we leave them to come spontaneously. And the whole price of Spiritism today is to let them come spontaneously to communicate, even though it's free for everyone to evoke them, but they're going to be for that risk to be mystified and so on. If there is a need and the group is really responsible and study the communication, well, it can be done, but it's not the general price that we do. So, but the time of Kardec was different to evoke the spirits. And in the medium book, there is a part there that Kardec even advised the starting medium to evoke his spirit guide to test if he is or she is not a medium. I by myself, when I start reading the spirit book and I come across this chapter on the medium's book, I stop for 15 days one time of a week that Kardec suggests there, and I say to my spirit, if I'm a medium, please come and write for me. I did it for 3 weeks. And Kardec said, after 3 weeks, if you do pray sincerely and so on, and happen nothings, just give up and you're not a medium. He says that in the medium's book. But that should be done in a sense of honest spirituality and love. Otherwise, the person do it fearlessly won't be any good advice for no one. But certainly no one is prohibited to do that, so we'll choose it or not, but we advise not.
Thank you, Adriano.
Hi, thank you very much for your talk. A couple of things came to mind with me. One thing, I used to volunteer on the psychiatric ward at a hospital here, and I worked with a lot of suicidal patients, people that tried to commit suicide, like one girl, young, beautiful woman, tried to jump off a building. She did jump off a building, 3-story building. Yeah. And she looked at me and she said, with broken limbs, she said, "What do you think, Abby? I'm still here." Which it was silent like now, and I said, well, I think there's a reason why you're still here. You get another chance. And what came to my mind was these people there, they were really tortured souls. Yeah. That their souls really were tortured. And I understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that in Brazil there are the Spiritist hospitals, yeah, right? Where while I was sitting here, I thought that I think it would, this is just my opinion, and from what I saw was that passes could, maybe really help some of these people, that their souls were, just so tortured. That's one thing. And I think for them, they were living a hell, like their life, committing suicide, trying to commit suicide, yeah, was a hell. And then I was also wondering, when you were a kid, you said you were tormented with the red sky. How long did that last? I mean, that must have been terrible to...
Yeah, it was terrible.
Thank you.
It lasted about maybe 5-6 years.
That's a long time.
And I'll be staying sometimes, and it was all mixed with nothingness, red clouds and so on. Sometimes my depression, crying and so on, lasts for 3 days in a row with that state. But coming to the passes is really something that helps, because it's some new energy that will restore a lot of things in the physical and spiritual body of the tormented person. It could be a spiritist hospitals like we have in Brazil. It helps a lot. But since there is no such hospitals yet in the United States, for the people conscious like you are, prayers, it's something that works as much as the passes. The person in prayer will help the person, and as well, positive thoughts, telling about, there's no such end in life and so on. The perspective that life never ends will help a lot the patients. There is this manual, maybe you have heard about it, that David Jobs, I think 1992, is a manual for suicide risk. And there is a research about the probably causes or that brings a person for suicide. And one of the items, there's three major items, but clearly I remember the lack of hope and perspective for the future life. The suicide person, in general, they lack of hope, and they lack of planning for future things. They don't have plans that we have, like having children, going jobs, kind of things that make life purposeful. And in that way, Spiritism and the perspective with Spiritism is full of hope that fulfills the gap of the mind that tends for suicide, bringing that healing for him and for her. In that way, the person that is in Spiritism and get engaged in this kind of patience, for my perspective, the best healing in medicine is trying to bring hope for those people, and that I'm sure that through hope they will, change their way of viewing life and get engaged in a better, living. And that way, I think, will come out experience that will give base them for to live longer or give up what their ideas are.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it was.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, thank you.
Thank you for your talk. Yes, just asking if for those that believed in nothingness, those that are nothingness,
Mm-hmm.
so they don't believe anything after death. If they have some spirits, some class of spirits that they gave some, report, because this week a friend of mine, her Russian, Russia has these things with the no religion, no belief or whatever. And her mother she heard was dying, almost dying, but she said, well, but she doesn't believe in anything. So I gave some explanation and some support. So I wonder if will coincide what you think, or what is written there in the book.
Well, the classes that Kardec brings here, there's not a class just saying that's for the atheists, the materialists that believed in nothing after death. Although, in other book, that the Memoirs of a Suicide, there is one particular class that fits this class that I think represents the whole majority of people. He was atheist. He believed in nothing on earth. Although he was a professor in Spain of a particular university, he was a member of a materialist philosophy of, I think, Auguste Comte. I'm not really sure. He was atheist. He believed in nothing after death. And he had tuberculosis. And prior to his death, he committed suicide. He said, well, there's nothing after death. I'll be suffering here for more 6 months for nothing. And he commits suicide. And he goes to the spiritual world and then rescued and so on. And there is his words saying, if I believed in something when I was incarnate, if I had a religion like you, he's telling to his fellow partners in the room, I wouldn't have committed suicide. In that way, after a long period in the spiritual world, explanations and so on, he came to realize that he was truly immortal spirit and starting to believe in God. But really, it didn't occur to him even after committing suicide. He got to come a long pathway in the spiritual world. Sometimes he was committed to doubt. still in the spiritual world, seen his body in the hospital already being treated, he would commit it with some doubt. But afterwards, explanations, healings, and so on, he realized. And he was such enthusiastic believer. It was like something that, he was waiting for thousands of years to believe. And what really helped him in the spiritual world. In that way, we have in Louis' books some examples as well of those atheists. They really are in the spiritual world suffering as well, because since they believed in nothing, sometimes they are in the spiritual like zombies, it could be that way. Some kind of they lose their sense, and they are. André Luiz describes a group of spirits that they are in a hospital, although they are in a hospital, but they are like many of them just laying in the floor or in the bed, sleeping. And they are in that sleeping for a long period, 10 years, 20 years, because they believed enough. In that way, they continue sleeping in the spiritual world until they wake up. Some of them wake up so scared, they just fly away running. And the spirit says, let them go. They wake up now. Some of them are in that state, but it varies the only examples that we have. But in here, we don't have a truly sample of that kind in the heaven and hell.
Thank you, Adriano. We'll make this the last question. Nano, please.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Good to be here. Why only few guys in whole world claiming that they can talk with the spirit? Why we, all of us, cannot have some contact with the spirit? And
okay.
yeah. And do you think that Kardec idea was a good thing for bad guys? Thank you.
Good thing for what?
For bad guys. Are they using the idea that no hell, just to keep doing bad things?
Well, first, we'll go for the first question. It's not only spiritists is entitled to talk with the dead, supposed to be dead. It happened since the dawn of human beings. Even the primitive, in such a way, in a primitive way, talk to the spirits. We can go through the anthropology research, the scientists that study the relations of the society, the building up of society, and so on. We see traces of their rituals communicating with the spirits. Even in the Catholic Church, that they didn't accept that, we have really a lot of the priests, nuns, and so on that communicated with the spirits. A lot of books related to that, and even the atheists, even though they couldn't believe that, they had the chance to talk with the spirits. And in this country here, I had a magazine I was just reading yesterday from Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln, with his wife, went to the meeting. They talked a lot with the discarnate spirits, and so on. So everyone can communicate with the spirits. So in Spiritist, that is in a way different because we do it in a methodological way. We study it deeply, and we deduce and harvest the consequence of it in an educational way. That happens different sometimes out there. People want to talk the spiritual world. They don't know why, the objective, so sometimes it's just a frivolous one and so on. But everyone can communicate with spirit, and often we do. The problem is that, so we are so mind closed for that, and so minded matter that all those experiences happens to us, and we miss it. Sometimes we see a spirit walking the street, and say it's just another person walking. Who couldn't say that it was a spirit? So, in that way, if we go in observing, and we see it in when we start a course for mediumship, the people say, I am not a medium, I never saw a spirit, I never had experience. And after studying, say, well, you know what? In that day, maybe it fits that. And later on, he discovered that he always saw the spirits, had communicated with them, but I thought that was the common. It was common, but not as, the matter, thought, or mind that we saw. So in that way, it's not a privilege of spiritism at all. And of course, about the Catholic hell of physis, the Spirit explains to us, and the historian, the scholars that studies the Bible, the Catholic, there's a lot of evil things in there. It's a real fact. Even though there's the other wing, there's the good and loving thing the Catholic Church brought for human beings, the people working there. There's the two sides. But the fact is, the idea of hell presented by the Catholic Church wasn't in the Bible itself originally. It was created by the minds behind the texts. If we go deep nowadays, there's dozens different texts coming out, and there's a lot of serious scholars studying the references, what they call criticism, and so on, explain how those texts come out to be, showing us clearly that was created by the minds behind the church to control the mind of people. If they hadn't that idea, why they fought so much to destroy other beliefs? They went for wars and so on against other beliefs. So if we're just for the love and protection of the people, and then there's no reason to kill people as the Inquisition did. Sometimes they did horrible things, and it was history. In already 1872, the Inquisition was still working in Rome, a couple of blocks away from the Vatican, on the furnace there. So there is a common price on this. So in that way, we're sorry to say there was the evil side of the people working in the church that used that kind of belief to, bring that kind of thing for people. But we were, and we still are in some way, in this kind of evolution. But little by little, with the help of Spiritism, we're getting rid of it. And if we could say, to close this, Abraham Lincoln came to abolish slavery in America, physical slavery. Spiritism, although almost at the same time, came to abolish slavery of this kind of belief. And everyone that wants to abolish himself, is open for each and everyone that will set anyone free, and anyone who wants to be free. And then that one depends on the will of each and every one of us.
Thank you, Adriano. We leave it open then for the invitation for many of us, I believe, begging, as we said at the beginning, to come back, to come back and discuss more with us and to study more with us. Tonight, because of time, we would like to transition into the end of this meeting, not into the passes, but we invite Kirsten to do a small visualization so we can finalize in a prayer in the same tone that we have taken this meeting, studying this beautiful topic, heaven and hell, and with the new perspective, new understanding of hell as well, and even heaven. Sometimes we think that it's just a bliss, but it's work. So, Kirsten, please, thank you.
So as we prepare ourselves for this moment of visualization and meditation, allow us to take a deep breath in. Soothing breath in and out. Move your head, move your arms a little bit. And let us just get into a comfortable position, let us close our eyes. And we close our eyes because it makes it easier for us to utilize a different part of ourselves in our mind, to visualize, to see in our mind's eye a broader horizon, and to be able to open up without any boundaries in our heart and mind. In this moment of gratitude that we freely are here together, let us take this opportunity to picture yourself in a place where you feel most at peace, whether it's beside a lake, in your hometown that you grew up in as a child, or in your backyard, or on the beach. Allow yourself to be in that place now. The day and the weather is perfect. And this day is a special day because you do not feel any stress, no worries, no thoughts about the obligations and commitments that you have. It's just you and a greater sense of yourself and the higher power that exists. And in this moment, you see your guardian angel or spirit guide walk towards you. And as he or she approaches you, you can already, even from afar, feel as if the rays of the sun are showering from the tops of your head down to the bottom of your feet. And it encompasses your whole self. There's a warm sensation that you feel in the depths of your heart, like a warm embrace that salutes you and encourages you. And your guide, your spirit guide, holds out their hand to you and whispers some phrases of encouragement, of inspiration that you have been waiting to hear for so long. Words that comfort your heart, words that penetrate to the depths of your soul. And allow yourself to bask in this moment, to feel ever more loved, cared for, and at peace. And at last, your spirit guide says goodbye. Final words of encouragement as we raise your thoughts up to our Creator. And in doing so, these healing lights fall as if from the sky, like little stars that again shower over you, balancing each chakra or vital center reharmonizing the structure of all the different spiritual bodies and you, the immortal soul. And now we come back to where we are, here in the physical body. As our spirit mentors continue to offer up their spiritual healing, their loving waves and vibrations of love surround us and are here to inspire us. With these thoughts in mind, let us in unison, each one of us, join together in our thoughts, giving gratitude for these moments together, giving gratitude for this evening's conversation on a new perspective of an old idea. We give thanks to our Creator for allowing us to reevaluate these old ideas so we can also understand our brother, our model and guide, Jesus, in a much more open and broader perspective, and welcome his humble, wise, and loving heart into our lives, day in and day out. And if nothing else, we ask you, dear Creator, to allow us, each one of us, to take home these messages, to be more self-aware, to work on our connection with you, with our divinity that is within us, so we also can affect change in a more positive way for the progress of this planet. And we ask and pray for those who are in need, those in our book of prayers, and those names that are in our hearts, whom we can think of now at this moment, so the Spirit mentors can go and assist those who are in need. We thank you, and so be it.